Alrighty, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Checkbox. My name is Minwoo or Min. It's very nice to see you all, and it's thank you so much for taking time out of your lunch to come along to this. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Yeah, looking forward to it. And before I get started, I might just mention this is very much sort of a one directional, I guess, discussion. Very much conversational. And so if you've got any questions, please feel free to pop it in the Q&A box in the Zoom panel below. If I don't get around to answering a question, I promise I'll respond to it by email afterwards. So I'm going to do my best. There is some content I want to get through. So if I'm not able to answer it or on the fly, then I'll get back to you right after this session. So again, quick introduction. My name is Min. I'm one of the customer success and delivery managers here at Checkbox. What that means is I get to be on the forefront of seeing Checkbox implemented inside all of our sort of customers in a wide range of industries and different teams and different functions. And I get the pleasure of doing that. And so I'm really on the ground seeing all of that play out. And in particular, if you haven't heard of Checkbox before, we're an automation platform, particularly using no code to enable non-IT users to actually build out automation software for their team or for their industry and organization. And so I get the pleasure of seeing automation come to life and seeing it achieve sort of strategic milestones in our customers. And so that's kind of the basis by which we'll kind of go through today's webinar. And I hope today's webinar will be helpful in thinking through for yourself the type of automation opportunities that exist and the ways that it can achieve your strategic goals for 2021. And in fact, that's probably the first question that I have. It's more of a rhetorical one. Maybe you haven't thought about it yet, but what is your 2021 strategy? We've had a pretty crazy last 12 months of 2020. I like to think that we've come out of it pretty well, at least here in Australia. And so if you haven't had the chance yet to really reflect and think about it, now's a chance for you to actually have a think. What is your 2021 strategy? What are the type of pillars that you're thinking for your organization, for your team? That really helps set up today's framework. So have a think about that. And if you'd like, you can share with me, through Q&A comments or whatever you'd like, but keep that in your back pocket. Now, in today's session, what I want to do is first kind of cover the general realm of professional work and how automation fits in with that, giving us a bit of a framework to help navigate some of the stories that I'm going to share in today's session. And then I'll look at 4 common strategic goals that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months. And they're pretty kind of common strategic goals. And I will use real life examples to kind of share how our customers have gone about achieving their strategic goals in relation so using automation to achieve their strategic goals. And then have sort of a Q&A session. I'll explain sort of how this is going to look like, because today is obviously 2021's first Checkbox webinar. So there's a whole slew of other webinars that are coming up. So super excited to share that with you. Cool. So the first thing that I'll start off with is a very helpful framework that I always share with really whoever I work with. And it's this idea of the elements of professional work. And it's this triangle that I use to describe the 3 facets of kind of work in general, and then how automation fits to that. So there's sort of people, process, and technology, and work is driven by these 3 elements, all sort of kind of moving together and collaborating with each other. And it can seem pretty high level just from a objective view, but why I like to kind of set this framework up is because it then helps us understand how technology actually helps people and how it actually improves processes. Sometimes those can be quite detached or sort of separated in the consideration process. So when we think of automation, we immediately jump to what's the technology that we're considering, instead of going, okay, who do we have from a people and capability side of things, and what processes do we have in place to help work drive the people to output, and where does technology fit in the grand scheme of things? So I thought I might share that first, so that I'll be referring to this triangle sort of throughout the stories that I'll be sharing. And the other helpful thing to kind of understand is where automation fits in the grand scheme of professional work. Now, some of you guys, I see some common names, names that I've seen before here, but I might just go through this together because this is a nice, again, framework to kind of think through where automation fits in the grand scheme of things. In the realm of professional work, we like to say that there are, broadly stuff that can be automated and stuff that can't be automated. And obviously for the things that can't be automated, we defer to human judgment, so human insight. And these are things that obviously it's not easy for a machine to do, but obviously for human, it's actually quite easy to do. Now, within the realm of stuff that can be automated, work that can be automated, there's broadly two sort of arms. So one arm is called, one arm is where the work does not require a human to be involved. It might be system to system communication. It might literally just be, numbers being calculated in the background using AI or machine learning. We call this robotic process automation. And this is the realm of automation where no sort of human judgment is required. Now, there is another arm where you do actually require an expert judgment. You do actually require at some point an expert to step in and say, yep, that's correct or that's not correct. And to give you sort of a classic example, would you trust a robot to do your surgery? I mean, sure, to a certain level of degree, the robot will be able to do your surgery with precision, but the judgment aspect of, I'm sure you'd like a human to be involved in. So that sort of work, you would require some expert decision-making in that process. And we call that EPA, or expert process automation. And the goal of expert process automation is to really enable the continuation of work from sort of systems through to humans and vice versa, and really enabling that smooth flow between people and technology, and that kind of back and forth that you saw on the previous slide there. Cool. So what I'm going to do today, and hopefully that kind of paints a picture of how professional work typically, we like to think of professional work in terms of frameworks and where automation fits in that kind of realm of what work can be done. And what I'll do is I'll share 4 common strategic goals. So the first one is around reduction of cost. The second one is around minimizing risk. The third one is increasing digitalization. And the last one is around improving customer experience or customer service. So potentially some of you guys may be thinking about strategic goals for 2021 and what maybe one of those 4 maybe your strategic goals for the year ahead. So hopefully this will be helpful, and I will share some real life cases with you. So let's go to the first one. The first one is around reducing cost. It's no surprise that after a rather tumultuous year that reduction in cost is a common theme across many of our customers, and in particular looking at saving costs. One way to look at it is automation can help reduce cost around people and technology, and our customers typically use technology to maintain sort of high levels of strategic output. And so what I'll show you later down the line is a way that we sort of categorize different types of work so that automation can capture really what is not required for sort of human intervention or human judgment. So one example here is we've got a large a telco with a legal team who is going through a restructuring process and really consolidating and making sort of their talent density tighter. And what that meant was the amount of work that their legal team was doing was still the same. It just happened that they had less people or less lawyers on their legal team. And so you can kind of tell sort of that the paradox, the difficulty of having to, on one hand, have less people resource, and yet at the same time have to service the same number of people within the business, because legal functions are typically sort of para or functions or supporting functions that serve the rest of the business. So what this particular legal team did was they looked to technology to leverage that sort of capability, the voiding capability, where people were potentially doing low value repetitive work, and removing that out from the legal team and automating that, and allowing the legal team to instead focus on high value, high strategic work. And so you have this sort of mutual kind of relationship between, on one hand, technology taking away the repetitive work, and automation sort of removing the tediousness of low value work, and humans or people really focusing on valuable, complex, and dare I say enjoyable work that is probably a bit better than the rote work that machines can do. And so this is an example of potentially using a fraction of your budget to actually focus on new technology to drive high efficient output. What I'll actually show you on the next slide is strategic work quadrant. We like to think of it, and this is very specific to this particular graph is for in-house legal teams, but it can really be applied to any kind of service-based organization. So you have on the kind of y-axis strategic value, and on the x-axis you have sort of risk. And so it's often a great exercise when you're thinking about automation to actually plot out where your different types of work sit on this 2x2 grid. On the top right-hand corner, you have very high value, high strategic work, but it's also quite high risk. And then you have in the sort of bottom left, sort of low value, low risk work. And so when anyone comes and says, hey, isn't automation scary for people because it takes away work from them? It effectively replaces them. Well, what we like to say is actually, it actually pushes the work towards the top right-hand quadrant, or the top quadrant, top left, top right quadrant for people. They can focus on more high-value in-house work, or anything that's sort of low risk but high strategic work can potentially be outsourced to an external sort of legal service provider. And then sort of the low value work that is repetitive can potentially be outsourced to law firms. And then finally, sort of the low value, low strategic work, that's, the rote work, the manual stuff, can just be automated. Can use automation to take that burden away, and then kind of shift the cost from the human resources side to the technology side. Now, coming back to the previous slide, another example of how automation kind of helps reduce costs is around technology consolidation. So we had a top 400 kind of company in the hospitality space, which had around 50 separate solutions, all sort of dispersed around the organization. You typically get different teams purchasing solutions that are specific to their team without necessarily thinking about how that communicates with the rest of the organization. So where automation can potentially provide value is actually consolidating that. And for this particular organization, they wanted to move from 50 to around 10 to 15. And so why that's also important is to consider the sort of manual admin overhead that automation can remove. Particularly when systems don't interact with each other very nicely, you end up having a person come in to facilitate the process of communication between those two technologies. So, even though you do buy technology to sort of create efficiencies, it ends up becoming slightly less efficient. And for this particular hospitality company, they ended up using new technology to actually consolidate and phase out old tech to drive lower cost on the technology side of that sort of professional work triangle that I showed you earlier. And so we see the two cost sides. All right, strategic goal number 2. So number 2, we have sort of minimizing process and organizational risk. So how do we do that? The kind of phrase that I like to use is automation technology allows organizations to operationalize procedures, policy, and ultimately minimize risk. And I want to look at sort of 2 examples here. One is sort of a process-based example, and one is very much so a large sort of board risk kind of example. So on the left-hand side here, you've got a large super fund who had a procurement process in sort of like a document form. And many of you guys may be able to empathize with this. Your procurement policy may be sort of a document PDF or perhaps an Excel spreadsheet. And what they found was, even though the policy was sort of defined, over time, business users actually deviated from the procurement policy. And in fact, when you went and surveyed users within the business, they were actually getting to a point where they would, follow the policy to a certain point, but then defer to their own experience or perhaps to the experience of their teammates to make procurement decisions. In the grand scheme of things, that's obviously not ideal for an organization looking to minimize their risk. And so what they did was they used automation to digitize the operation of their procurement policy. So instead of having that as a PDF, and having that sort of go back and forth as communications, sort of intangible communication, they actually digitize the whole thing so that the risk of business users deviating from the process was minimized. Business users were effectively guided along that process and made to follow specific sort of thresholds and guidelines, and were automatically roped in with the relevant stakeholders to facilitate that journey. And so this is an example of how technology can be used to operationalize process and policy and standardize it across the organization, reducing sort of deviant risk, as we call it. So things tend to kind of deviate over time as you make it more manual. The other example that we have is around data breach incidents. This is obviously a very interesting topic, probably for many of you on call today, but this is a legal team within a large FMCG company. So they noticed, very similar to the first example I shared with you, that the way that data incident breaches were being flagged ended up making the whole process, also the friction between the different interfaces. So you had someone who flagged the data incident breach. It would then go sort of offshore, and that team would then have to follow up and find out more details before it went through to the legal team. And so all these different interfaces weren't digitized or automated. They were really manual, and it ended up creating a lot of friction between these different teams, creating a longer than ideal process for addressing what is obviously a large risk data breach within the organization. So similar to the first example that you've got on the left, this particular FMCG company use automation to actually digitize their whole data breach reporting process. And so it's all centralized, and it actually, again, similarly ropes in the relevant stakeholders, whether it's sort of legal or if it's risk and compliance or whoever it might be. The automation technology that they use actually pulls them in, and small incidents were able to be sort of self-served by the business. Perhaps it's just an email that you've sent out to the wrong person. I can just have a list of items that the business user needs to go through, and then on you go. Whereas large incidents sort of rope together large incident teams to respond to the particular breach. And so this is an example of how technology can actually reduce overall organizational risk by making this sort of incident flagging process a bit more seamless. Now, before I continue, you'll notice that a common theme across sort of process is the interface component of it. And I always like to say the more people involved, in particular, the more people in different teams that are involved, the higher the level of complexity in sort of making sure everyone's on the same page. And so that in and of itself is another process to consider. So for example, in the first example I showed, you may have a procurement policy, but really there is a hidden, almost invisible layer that sits across the top. It's this admin overhead kind of, very hard to describe, a back and forth process that never really gets described, but everyone factors into that calculation. When I say, how long does this process take for you? Everyone factors that into the procurement policy or whatever process they're thinking about, but no one really addresses it as what it is. It's the sort of interfacing cost that you will find with most processes. And technology is really good at sort of consuming that admin overhead, as we like to say here. So the third one we'll be looking at is sort of enabling digitalization. So this is a fairly popular one. It doesn't, it's more of a qualitative strategic goal, but certainly within organizations that have a lot of manual processes, it tends to be quite a high strategic goal for them. So this is about applying technology usually to transform manual processes into digital solutions. Again, sort of coming back to the top 400 Australian company in the hospitality sector, there were a lot of paper-based forms. So they're really in the hospitality and gaming space. And given the nature of their business, they actually had a high number of reporting activities which were performed on paper. Paper forms that needed to be filled out by staff on the floor, which then get kind of scanned and sent through to headquarters via email, which then again get printed out and get stored as a hard copy for 3 to 4 years. And so you can tell that the number of sort of manual processes creates a burden for sort of the person side of that professional work in having to execute those processes. And technology can then come in and add value by automating all of that into a sort of digital format. And so for these guys, they use automation to transform those paper-based activities into a more digital interactive solution. And it's just another way that we see process changing from manual one into a digital one. And so perhaps everyone on call, if when you think about your situations and your organizations, are there manual processes that you interact with on a day-to-day basis or week to week, month to month? Where are the opportunities that lie within your organization to actually apply technology to make digital solutions kind of replace and make better the manual ones that you've got today? So maybe having to think about that will be helpful for you. Now we're at the last strategic goal now, and I know I'm flying through these. I know in another life I would have been a rapper, so if you've got any connections, let me know. But if you've got any questions, of course, or if you want any clarification or if you want me to share, please always let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of have a chat. So the last one is around improving customer experience. And this one is, around using automation technology to improve the processes and customer experience for people within the business. It's really more relevant for, service-based organizations who are looking to serve their clients, whether that be an in-house legal team or potentially a law firm. You might be looking at different ways to use digital solutions to cater for a better journey for your clients. So perhaps it's something you guys are thinking about. Again, coming back to the legal team within the large telco, they were looking to deliver legal services in a digitized fashion and sort of reduce the friction between the legal team and the business users that they serviced. when following up on the progress of a particular process. And this is not specific to any one particular use case, but certainly for any service provider, you'll find that there is always going to be friction, as I kind of described that invisible admin layer, as I was mentioning before, where there's a back and forth between your client and yourself, and giving them updates and giving them timely advice. Sometimes you need to wait a little longer. So that kind of delta between what your clients expect in terms of velocity of your service, as well as the quality, and what you're actually realistically able to provide, starts to become evident, I think, when like time kind of extrapolates itself and the complexity of the work increases. And so automation can really be used to close that delta, to make it a bit more enjoyable and improve the customer experience for your end clients. And in this particular instance, automation was used to provide self-service solutions. And they're really helpful because a couple of reasons. One is 24/7 access. So, obviously we've got sort of the workday, but you've got these automated tools that allow your customers to access that information at any time. You then also have sort of the removal of the need for back and forth between legal team and the business. So in this case, there was sort of updates integrated. So, hey, your particular NDA, let's say for instance, has reached this stage. It's being reviewed by this person, and we're going to then head, your 1 out of 3 stages completed. Hey, you're now at the 2nd of 3 stages, etc. So really kind of bringing the business user into that journey to improve that visibility, but also that customer experience from their journey perspective. And then the third one is around sort of being able to be given a faster turnaround on their particular query. And alluding back to that strategic work quadrant I talked about earlier, sort of the low value, low strategic work can really be self-served and an answer can be given straight away because it is low risk. But for sort of high value, high strategic, and at the same time, high risk work can immediately be filtered out to the relevant subject matter experts for them to address straight away. And so you have sort of that kind of dynamic as well. Now, that kind of brings it to the end of the 4 strategic goals. And to recap them again, you have the reduction of cost via sort of either consolidation of headcount or consolidation of systems. You have the minimizing of risk across process as well as organization. You have also increasing digitalization as the organization moves from manual to digital. And the final one is sort of improving customer experience and using sort of automation technology to provide service round the clock with the same quality. Now, we have covered this at a pretty high level, I understand, and perhaps some of your strategic goals line up with this, and we hope it would, and you're interested in that. So what we're going to do for the rest of this year is actually kick off a series, sorry, I said rest of the year, but rest of the kind of webinar series is actually start to kick off a sort of more practical series off the back of this first one around how you can, look into your organization and say, well, where does automation fit in the grand scheme of things? Does it fit with what we have right now? Or, do we need to wait a little while? What elements of our organization can be automated? And that sort of practical aspect of automation will be shared in the following webinar series kind of sessions that are to come, and they're going to be in 30-minute formats like this. And so the next webinar is on the 24th of March, same time as today, same day. It's a month from now, and it'll be around how to ideate and validate your team's automation use cases. It's a very common question we get, which is, how do I know that I'm ready for automation? And so if you can't wait till the 24th, feel free to email me. More than happy to have a chat. But if you're able to and you're interested, we will be sending out a link to you in the coming few weeks for you to sign up to that particular webinar. You can go ahead and jump on that, and we'll do a presentation on how to actually practically go about navigating that. Or if you're not using the email link, we'll be kind of sharing the details on LinkedIn as well. So make sure to follow Checkbox AI there. Awesome. Well, I hope that was informative and helpful for you. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I will open it up for some Q&A. If you've got any questions, feel free to send them through. I will try my best to address them. But if you need to hop off, thank you so much for coming along to today's webinar. I hope you were able to get something out of it, and we hope to see you at the next one.